Hi, good morning. It's Kim with www.embodiedfreshlight.com. And I realize I haven't made a video in about 9 months. I've been really busy. I'll talk about that maybe on this video, maybe not. We'll see how things go. But this is a different video than I've ever made. I'm in my kitchen, and for 2 years I've been working on perfecting a recipe. So I wanted to share that with you today. And basically, growing up, I always thought it was my mother's recipe, but found out it was my grandmother's recipe. They would make Italian spaghetti, and that was our comfort food. That was so good. And I've been trying to imitate it with fresh tomatoes from our garden. So I'm going to show you what I all got here. A big bowl. I hope you can see that. These are a combination of garden, Roma, and heirloom tomatoes. And then I've got some other heirloom tomatoes over there that are orange and purple. And I like the heirloom tomatoes probably the best. I'm going to plant more of them next year. They've got a thicker skin and they're meatier. They do come in red. They come in all colors: yellow, red, purple, orange. Thing is, it'll turn whatever you're making, it'll be more of an orange than an orange red color if you use them. But the taste doesn't seem to be affected too much. So to start off, it took me, like I said, 2 years to figure out how to do this. You have to use a ton of seasoning if you're going to use fresh tomatoes. Now, I've already put these, when you use fresh tomatoes, you have to immerse them in boiling water till the skin starts to crack and peel. Then you take them out, put them in ice water, and you peel them, which is really very easy. I'm going to guess, I've got 30, 35, maybe even 40 cups of tomatoes I'm going to end up with. But for this video, I'm just going to make one recipe, which is 8. The rest I'm going to can. But so, for my mother's recipe, or my grandmother's, this is what it was. A can of tomato paste, a can of tomato sauce, and a can of tomato soup. I've tried other kinds of soup. I've tried some organic. I prefer organic, but I've tried I don't know what the brand was of organic, and it completely altered the taste. But you put this is my mother's recipe, and it's quick and easy. You put them in your pot, equal parts of water, and then 1 clove of garlic, 1 teaspoon of oregano. Now, for my fresh tomatoes, I like Greek oregano. It's much stronger, and I grew this in my garden. And I've substituted just regular organic oregano that I bought at Whole Foods, and it does alter the taste some. However, that's with the fresh. With this, actually, the stuff I get at the grocery store, the organic stuff, tastes better. So it's that, 1 clove of garlic, 1 teaspoon of oregano. Now, I almost never add salt when I'm cooking. People can add it later. I definitely do not, when I was just making the canned recipe. And my mother's recipe also had sugar. I don't use sugar. I use stevia or monk fruit, something like that. But you don't need to. I don't think it makes it taste any better, and it's not needed if you're just doing this. The only reason I'm really telling you about this recipe, well, first of all, someone might want it, might not have time to do all this. But the only way I was able to get the correct taste with this was to know what this tasted like. So if you really want to know what taste you're shooting for, you want to use these, because you're going to start with a certain amount of seasoning. It's all about the portions, I'll tell you. But then after it cooks down and you do the next step, you end up adding more seasoning, to the way I do it, to get it to taste like this. If you don't do this, you're just going to do it to taste. So now the next thing I want to show you here is, and there is tomato paste in this recipe, so everything's organic in here, and I use organic tomato paste. I have made so much spaghetti sauce this year because we're sharing it with our kids. that we have bought grocery stores out of the organic tomato paste. So I am actually going to have to at some point go to the store and get some more. I've only got 4 cans left. I hope I don't have to go to a whole bunch of different stores to find out what I need. But I can't do that till I know how many cups of tomatoes I have. The other ingredient that you're going to use in your fresh tomato sauce is salt. I use the Redmond's real salt. It's I usually add a little bit less than the recipe calls for. If it calls for a teaspoon, I go a little bit less because this is a stronger salt than what I was used to till I found out about this. But it's very good. It's got a lot of minerals in it. But the thing I noticed is right away when I had it, when I was a little kid and we'd go to movie theaters and get popcorn, it always tasted different. I didn't know what it was. Well, apparently back then, the salt maybe wasn't as refined or whatever, but this tastes just like it. So anyways, for my fresh tomato recipe, it's going to be all about the portions. So I gotta grab my recipe card here, just one second. Okay. So I've already done the part where I have submerged them in boiling water and then ice water. So they're ready to go. This won't take long, but as you can see, they're really super easy to peel. And now, I normally make videos about consciousness and ascension and that type of thing. And one of the things that is going to help, and we also need to be getting back to nature to do this ascension that we're all here to do. But one of the things that will really help is having organic foods, healthy foods, and anytime you can pick something from your garden. All of these tomatoes today came from our garden. I do supplement at the farmer's market sometimes. There's one vendor there who has all heirloom stuff, and I love getting stuff from her. But, when you've grown it in your own garden, and there's a certain amount of energy your energy that you put into your food. And it's fresh, and anytime you can pick something right off the vine and eat it right away, you're going to get the most nutritional value and enzymes, which is going to help your body function better and your consciousness increase. So, now, being that these are being cooked, of course, you do lose some of the enzymes in this, but this, I live in a state where we don't have year-round gardens or anything, and so if I want fresh vegetables from my garden in the wintertime, I have to preserve them. Now, sorry, I have to keep stepping out. You can... Oh, I can't think of what it's called right now. I'm having a brain freeze. There's other ways to preserve things and salt in that. And I will do pickles that way. I don't know why I can't think of that name right now. And sauerkraut, fermenting. But they do not last the entire winter. So this is what you got to do. The other thing with this is that there is so much oregano in here and garlic that it's really an immune boosting meal. So this is an heirloom tomato. This one is. So it won't take me too long to get all these cut up. But so what I'm going to do here is cut up my 8 cups of tomatoes. And then the ratio is You're going to want to write this down if you want to try to make this. The ratio for this recipe is 1 teaspoon of Greek oregano for every 2 cups of tomatoes, 1 clove of garlic for every 1 cup of tomatoes, and it's a teaspoon of salt for every 8 cups of tomatoes, and not a teaspoon, but there's a little tiny spoon in the stevia. If you were using sugar, it would be 1 teaspoon sugar. But there's a little tiny teaspoon in there. That's about an equivalent of 1 teaspoon of sugar. So what I do, I think I want aroma. This is aroma tomato. They're the meatiest. They're the best for your sauces. So what I do is I use one of those little tiny spoons that come with the stevia. And to me, that's equivalent to a teaspoon. So that's what I'm going to add. Once I get all these cut up, I'm going to add to my pot. You want to kind of keep the white middle part out. Some of these tomatoes are riper than others. Of course, you're always best off having the ripest. But we're getting to a time of year where things are not going to ripen anymore. And I don't want to use anything that's too unripened, but a little bit unripe is okay. And with the extra seasonings, you can alter the taste. So a lot of times what I do is I just leave that top part that's not quite ripe, and I toss that. And as of last week, I had actually said, because I think I've canned 26 jars. Some are pints. I've got 5 kids, and depending on the size of their families, it's a quart is more than 1 meal serving. And so they're not all quarts, but I think I've got 26 or 28 jars I've already canned. And after the last time I had, I think, 30 cups of cut up tomatoes, and I had enough. But then our weather's been really strange this year. Normally we wouldn't even have tomatoes anymore. But our summer started about 2 weeks late. Everybody wasn't able to get their gardens put in because it was too cold and rainy, I think. So it started about 2 weeks late. But now these last 2 years, our summer seems to have extended more into September. But now we're coming to a time where there's less daylight, so these aren't going to ripen anymore. So we had to pick them and do something. I can't stand watching food go to waste. And we also had more than one hailstorm. So some of these got cracked, and if they crack, they will spoil. So I had to get them off there and do something with them. So what have I been up to? I might as well talk about this while I'm finishing up this task. I ended up about 1.5 years ago, and I have talked about this, because back in 2019 I retired permanently from nursing. So I thought, well, it ended up that I felt like I needed to get out of the house a little bit more and have a little bit more socialization. And my husband's retired, and I don't care how much you love someone, you just can't look at someone all day long, every single day. And I was working on my business, but I wanted to be around people some. And I also wanted to do something in my community. So I found a job. You know, it's a lot easier than other kinds of jobs, sort of. It's more physical, but it's not as technical. That's only 4 miles away from my house. So I just started every other weekend, and I've been doing that ever since. Well, a lot of jobs, or a lot of healthcare places, they're short-staffed just like everybody else. So I ended up working a lot and picking up a lot of hours, and it just ended up kind of taking over my life, which I didn't want it to have. And it saps your energy being around people that are not healthy. That's the reason they live there. It's like an apartment building for people who have medical needs, but they don't require like long-term care. So I got to the point where I just couldn't do that anymore. And so I put my notice in for my position, and I'm just going to be only on call now. There's still plenty of availability. I've gotten lots of calls to come in. I just have to learn to have better boundaries. When I can do it, I can do it. When I can't, I can't. So, and then just a lot of family stuff going on. And then in the summertime, as you can see, we're busy with the garden, and we have a cabin up north. So all of my time is taken up with that and family and my kids, my grandchildren. So here I am 9 months later, finally getting back into making videos. So my regular kind of videos I will be coming back to shortly. But I wanted to make this one now. Been thinking about making it for a while. But every time I had enough tomatoes to make a recipe, it just wasn't a good time to record. So I decided today is going to be the day. And I realized I wish the lighting was better. It's not, and there's nothing I can do about that, so I apologize. But I decided today is the day, because if this is something you want to do, you might want to think about, if you're going to plant a garden, you might want to think about planting the ingredients for this, because most of this I've gotten out of my garden. So here we go. The only thing I didn't get with this recipe I'm making is my garlic. We tried planting garlic last year, and it comes up in the spring, I think. Well, ours never came up, and when we dug where we planted it, it wasn't there. We live about a block and a half off of a lake, and so there's a lot of animals that wander around. And besides the squirrels and the rabbits, the squirrels are the ones that dig. We think an animal dug them up and took them. We have squirrels coming into our garden, taking bites out of our tomatoes, and then we gotta throw them. And so, but then again, it could be a rabbit, because my husband saw a rabbit standing up on its back legs trying to get at a tomato. So anyway, so I planted the tomatoes, back to what I was talking about. I planted the tomatoes and the oregano. I had 2 plants of Greek oregano, and I've realized I just kept harvesting it and cutting it and pruning it all summer. I think oregano flowers, but I never let it flower, and it just kept growing new shoots. So I did get a lot out of those 2 plants, but the last time I made it, I had ran out, and I said, well, that's it, because it doesn't taste quite right with the other oregano. But because we've had such a funny weather year, I didn't take the plant out. I just cut them way down, and I ended up getting enough oregano for another round of spaghetti sauce canning. So that's what I'm doing. And I only cut half of it. I might have to go out and get the other half. I prefer to cut it and let it dry. It's a little bit stronger of a flavor, and you use much less with the dried than with the fresh. You've got to use about 3 times as much fresh. So I may end up going out and picking the rest of the fresh that's out there if I run out of oregano. Okay, so I got 8 cups here. I got to step off a minute and rinse off my hands. Okay, so my 8 cups I'm going to put into my pot. Now for each 4 cups And I got tomatoes everywhere. I have this old plastic tablecloth that I use for when I'm doing any canning or any kind of stuff with pie crust or whatever, which I don't do often, but occasionally. So this recipe does call for paste. I use organic paste. Everything's in here is organic. And you're going to use 1 6-ounce can to every, let's see, it is every 4 cups. I got to look here just to double check. To every 4 cups of tomatoes. So I'm going to use 2 of these for the 8 cups. I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of oregano for every cup of tomatoes. So that's going to be 8 teaspoons. But this is just going to be, put it right here. Actually, I got to dry my hands off a little. This is just going to be where you start, because you're going to cook it and cook it down, and eventually we're going to take the chunks out of there, and I'm going to use my immersion blender and turn it into more like a puree and add it all back in and cook it some more. At first I didn't do that step with the immersion blender, but as I was making them for my children, I knew that my grandchildren might not like the chunks. So then I started using the immersion blender. And what I found out was the taste was much improved because the tomatoes and everything absorb so much of the flavoring. When you're just tasting the sauce, it doesn't taste quite right. So after you've done what you do with the immersion blender, so this is 1 teaspoon, you're gonna need a bunch of spoons, and you're gonna add stuff to keep tasting it. And I'll show you that step as we go along. So there's 1 teaspoon. So that's how I do it. I'm going to put 8 teaspoons of this in here to start with. The other thing I want to tell you too is when you're cooking this, especially if you're using the Greek oregano, I often thought I added way too much and I've ruined it. It smelled so strong of Greek oregano. This was in the beginning. But it really does cook into it very nicely. Okay, so I'm going to pause this while I get some of these ingredients in here, and I'll show you the end product. So I have to lift this because the light is so terrible I can't even see. Alrighty. Okay, I just got the oregano in here. I actually stopped the recording because when I'm talking, I lose track of how much I'm counting. So now I've got my stevia. And so it's 1 teaspoon of sugar if you're using sugar, or 1 spoon of your stevia per 3 to 4 cups. And we're going to taste this at the end, and we might need to add some more. And it depends how ripe your tomatoes are and what kind you're using in that. And I'm going to put my 1 teaspoon of salt in. Just a little under a teaspoon there. And now I've got to get 8 cloves of garlic. And I'm going to use these and shred them in. And I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me doing that. That's going to take me a while to do all that. I use this. I've got a little bit left. I put them in here till I've got a few, then I use the garlic press. So I'm going to use at least 8 cloves of garlic, average size loaves. If you've got real large loaves, that counts as 2. If you've got real small loaves, that counts as 1, 1.5. But then again, you're going to taste it at the end to see if it's how you like it. And then I'm going to add my 2 cans of this, and I'll be back to show you the finished product that we have to simmer for at least an hour. I'm going to say more like an hour and a half, maybe even up to 2 hours. So I'm going to pause again, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so I've added my tomato paste, the 2 cans, and I've got all but one of the cloves of garlic left. And this is a huge clove, so instead of the 8 that I would have used in here, I'm only using 4. So I just take my shredder right over my pan. And I get it all shred up. The other thing I was going to mention too, this is definitely a labor of love. And you put your energy into things, but you do not really save any money. By the time if you have to buy all these tomatoes, it's probably going to cost more than buying a can of spaghetti sauce. But if you grow them or get them, farmer's market I found recently isn't always reasonably priced. Sometimes you find vendors that sell things really reasonably, but as I found, most of them, they're probably still less than the grocery store, definitely fresher, but it's not as economical as it used to be. So, but you're getting a lot healthier food, healthier ingredients. And even if you buy organic, it's just not the same as making it yourself. So, the last of the ends of the garlic, I'm going to try to squeeze through here, use all of them up. I don't want to waste anything. And as I said before, you are probably going to end up adding, you're just going to do it by taste. It might taste too fresh, it might taste a little sour, it might taste, especially if your tomatoes are not quite ripe. So then that's where you're going to go, okay, this needs a little more garlic, it needs a little more oregano, it needs a little more stevia or monk fruit, and maybe a little more salt. Because sometimes I'll get it where, that's a little too sweet, and I need to salt it up a little bit. So I'm going to stir all this up. Sorry, you're going to get all the noises of the neighborhood, including my loud best hound outside. He must be seeing another dog. We also live by a little airport, so you may hear planes going over. But so I'm going to stir all this up, put it on the stove, bring it to a boil, not a hard boil, just so it's starting, and then I'm going to turn it down to simmer, and I'm going to cook it probably. It's going to reduce some while you cook it, but I'm probably going to cook it for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. If I don't watch it and I don't turn it down enough, then it's going to be more like, an hour and a half maximum. And then once I do all that, I'll show you the next step. I'm going to take the solid out, the chunks, and I'm going to put them in a container with my immersion blender and add them back in, and that's where I'm going to do the tasting. So I'm going to pause for a while. I've got all these other tomatoes to work on while I'm cooking this, and I may be in different clothes when you come back, because here we start off cool in the mornings. It was 60 this morning, which isn't that cool for here for this time of year, but then it's going to be 70 something later on, and I'm going to be way too warm, especially when I start cooking and start water bathing all this. So once again, I'm going to pause this, and I'll see you probably in a couple hours. Okay, so now I'm going to show you. I cut up all the rest of the tomatoes. This pot is full, except maybe that much from the top. So I have to add all the ingredients here, but that first pot of 8 that I made is ready for the next step. And which is good I used another pot, because I don't have one big enough. Altogether, this ended up to be 34 cups of cut up tomatoes. And so what it'll probably be is 8, because it's going to cook down a little bit, but not that much. It'll be about 8 quarts and maybe a pint that I end up canning. So my next step I'm going to do, I have another bowl and a strainer. And what I'm going to do, oops, I did forget to grab one. You're probably going to want to let it cool down. I use an immersion blender, which will just go right in to grind up the solid stuff. You can use a regular blender, but you gotta let it cool quite a bit before you do that. So, it seems to me there's something I'm forgetting. Oh, one thing I'm forgetting. 1 second. I gotta grab that. My container. This is what I'm gonna put the solids in to grind them up. Okay, so I'm just gonna start with a big slotted spoon. And I'm just gonna put my tomato sauce into a strainer. Get as much of the solid out as I can. And I'm just gonna stir that. Let the solid drain out of there, or the liquid drain out of there, so I've got the solids left here. The pulp, I guess you could call it. Okay. So I'm just gonna put this in this bowl. I could use this bowl or this, either way. I've got an end piece that I can put over my immersion blender so that the blades don't get dull if I put it in metal or glass. And I'm going to get most of this out. I may not get all of it. My grandkids will still eat it if there's a little bit of pulp in it. They don't mind the seeds. And everybody who's ever had the spaghetti recipe just raves about it. Even the ones with the tomato soup, sauce, and paste. So we're gonna stir that. Doesn't matter if you don't get all the liquid out, because it's all gonna get stirred back in together in the end. And as you can see, it's still pretty warm and steamy. I did let it cool for a little while. So there's not too much more solid left in here. And I've even used, because our tomatoes I didn't always have large amounts of tomatoes to do this. Sometimes I just had a couple jars at a time. And so our cherry tomatoes also did really well. So I'll even use those. And I skin them just like the other ones, but you don't have to cut them up. You just put them in whole because you're going to puree them. And actually they're pretty good because cherry tomatoes are a little bit sweeter than regular tomatoes. Okay. Now I'm going to make sure I get all that sauce scraped from here as best as I can. Sorry about the banging. Get it up. 1 second here. I've got to pause. I've got somebody at the door. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. All right, so I've got all of the pulp in here. So I'm just going to put it into this. You can see what I'm doing a little easier if I use this. I'm going to do about half at a time. So I just take my immersion blender, which I don't have plugged in yet. 1 second. I had the fan plugged in instead. It gets a little warm in here when I'm cooking. Okay. into my sauce. Set my blender there. Okay. Now I'm going to add the rest of the pulp. This way I don't have any chunks of anything left. Sorry for the banging. Okay. And we're going to put that back in. Stir it all back in. Alrighty. Okay. So now I'm going to move this down so you can see it a little better. And I'm going to get something I can kind of pour this with so you can see what the consistency is. I'll just grab a little measuring cup. And you can see it's pretty thick. But still liquidy. So now is where I'm going to taste it. Because now I might have to add, like I told you at the beginning, could be more salt, could be more sweetener, could be more oregano, or it could be more garlic. So let's see how it is here. Pretty warm still, so I'm going to blow on it. That's actually pretty good. I think the only thing I'm going to add is just another pinch of salt, and it's ready to go. Usually that's not my experience, but I think because for this first batch, I had probably the ripest tomatoes I have. So I'm just going to add a little, it's a little more than I wanted, just a pinch of salt. And that's done. So I'm just going to set this aside, let it cool, cook my other spaghetti sauce, add all the ingredients, and I'm going to mix them together and can them. So I'm going to end the video for now, but I will be back after all of these jars of spaghetti sauce are ready and canned. I want to show you the end product. Sometimes when I do it, now if you're not going to can, you're just going to refrigerate this until you're ready to eat it. But once I have it all canned, I'll have several meals. We have more than enough for us, so this is for my children. So I'll have several meals to deliver to them, or jars of spaghetti sauce, some applesauce that I made too, organic applesauce, and they'll have some good food for the winter. So I will be back to show you the end product. See you in a couple hours. Hi everybody, I'm back. It's several hours later. It's about 5:20 in the evening here, Central Time. And so what I got is 8 beautiful quarts of spaghetti sauce. And that's my final product. But it wasn't as easy as the first batch that I showed you. If you remember, I tasted that and it just needed a little salt. This one needed salt, garlic, and more oregano. So I took care of that. The other thing is, I'm just going to go through the portions one more time, or the ratio. And if you want, I had said in the beginning that I have to kind of crouch down here to talk. I said in the beginning I used 1 6-ounce can of tomato paste with every 8 cups of tomatoes. You can use 2 if you want a richer, thicker sauce. And if your tomatoes are not quite as ripe as they should be, that kind of helps the flavor. So I did that with some of these, because my first batch that I showed you, that was with real ripe tomatoes, but then this one wasn't, so that's why I had to add more seasoning. But so it's 1 clove of garlic per cup of tomatoes till you get to your final part after you've blended the solid pieces. 1 teaspoon dried oregano per every 2 cups tomato. 1 6-ounce can of paste, organic, for every 8 cups of tomatoes, or 2 for 8 cups if you want it a little richer. 1 teaspoon of sugar if you're going to use sugar, and I use stevia, every 3 to 4 cups tomatoes. 1 teaspoon salt per 8 cups tomatoes, and that is the recipe. So I hope you enjoyed this. I always wanted to make a cooking video, so hopefully this turned out okay. Okay, and I'll be back with my regular recordings. Again, this is Kim with www.embody-light.com. See you soon.